everyone. I hope everyone is in good spirits and continuing to enjoy the AI Chronicles episodes. Many of us in the AI space are aware of the two popular terms vector databases. This technology is catching up everywhere and being used in several different ways. So, you may be wondering, why am I talking about this? Well, today I have one of the co-founders of a growing vector databases company, Weaviate, Bob. Hi, Bob. It's a pleasure to have you over my podcast. How are you doing?
Hey Sonam, I'm great, and it's great to meet you. So I'm excited to, talk vector databases with you today.
Awesome. That's so great. Not just vector databases, but I have different spectrums of questions for you. And
Sure.
let's start with one of my, the question that I keep thinking about a lot. So, with the proliferation of AI-related headlines and media coverage, how do you discern genuine innovation from the hype in this space?
So that's an excellent question. So what I like to do, or what I can do as like a, as me person, as Bob, or like representing Weaviate, is that I always like to, stay very grounded and focus on the use cases and what people are building, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So before you know it, we're talking about how you read articles how AI is going to take over the world, and I always say, well,
Oh,
we're still
goodness.
we're still predicting a token after another token. So let's by the time that takes over the world, we'll let's and I think, but I do think it's important because the um, if we don't do that, then well, if we keep doing that, we confuse people. And if we don't do it, we just focus on helping people building new applications. Because I really can say it's the innovation, thanks to what the models are doing, is absolutely there. I think, I mean, I don't have to tell you that, right? And probably the listeners of your podcast, they also know that. But it's like, okay, but we also still think of like, what's the direct business impact of that, right? So
Yeah.
how do we help people bring these applications to production. And to do that, we need to stay grounded, and we need to say, okay, this is where we are, this is where we not are, right? And those kind of things. So that's how I do that.
Sense. So, do you think people around the world have put AI on a pedestal or have misconceptions? And if you think yeah, then how would you suggest addressing those?
So yes, I mean, look, the fact the fact that a hype is happening is, in my opinion, not bad per se, right? I mean, if a great, I like to listen to a lot of music. So if a great new album comes out, then a hype evolves around the album and the artist, which is great because that means that people know it exists, right? And people know that they can listen to the music. So the fact that this is happening is a good thing. It puts it on the radar. Uh, what was the second part of your question again about the hype?
If people have any misconceptions around AI, given that they're putting it on
Yes.
pedestal, how would you suggest addressing those?
Yes. So what starts to happen is that, as in any hype, is that people that they think that they can do more with it
Hmm.
than that you actually can. And even there, I'm in two minds because um, there's also a lot of serendipity happening, right? So especially, I mean, we don't see that with the corporate more enterprise customers that we have, but we do definitely see that with the in the open source community and the more startups, that they really try
Hmm.
to push they try to push the boundaries of what's actually possible. And that's good because serendipity happens there and they figure stuff out and they build new types of applications. So that's all good. Um, uh, so all in all, I think it's a net positive.
Hmm.
But at some point when I was like about a year ago or something, when I saw all these people go on television and newspapers and what have you to really talk about the doom scenarios, I was like, oh boy, this is just that's not good. But that's kind of dying. I mean, you see it now every now and then, but even if it happens now, people start to call it out, and that's I think that's a good thing.
Makes sense. And yeah, so moving from hype to trends, are there any specific sectors or industries where the AI adoption and innovation are particularly pronounced or something you find personally interesting?
Yeah, so those are two different the I have two different answers to those two questions.
Okay.
So um the it the first answer almost nowadays sounds like a cliche, but it's true. It's like everywhere where businesses depend on unstructured data, there you
Mm,
see it a lot,
yeah,
right? So that ranges from e-commerce to legal to unstructured data within banks and that kind of stuff. So it's a that's a very yeah, that's almost the obvious answer, right? But it's true. So that's what we see. Then the second thing that I'm excited about is like so we're spending some time and effort now on something called generative feedback loops and that
hmm
kind of stuff. I'm super excited about because now we're starting to add data back to the database that's being generated with a vector embedding. And the database, so the models now can basically have an opinion on what's stored in your data. So in your database. So it's really we're weaving the database and the models together. And that's something that I'm extremely excited about because that is really a new paradigm, right?
right.
So
hmm
pure vector search is just yeah, that's a form of NoSQL, you could argue, right? But the gen feedback loops and these new AI native applications, that's really a new paradigm. So that's something I'm super excited about.
That's very cool. Yeah, I heard a lot about generative feedback loops and read a little bit about it as well. Like, I think, yeah, that's like the next step or the natural next step in terms of using these databases and models. So
Agree.
we spoke about the hype and the trends and what's going on in the AI space, but something that I'm always concerned about and I like to question or ask people what their thought process is the ethical consideration. So how do you approach the ethical implications of AI development and deployment within your organization?
Yes, so that depends a little bit on what it's about, right? So um, if somebody uses AI to, um, I don't know, review product descriptions on an e-commerce store selling clothing, then
hmm
I am less concerned about these kind of things, right? Becomes different if people are building applications, for example, for medical purposes and those kind of things. So the yeah, and that's even then a distinction between the moral and the ethical implications. I mean, the problem is that we just need to somehow and there's a lot of amazing work happening there, right? Is that the models are biased, right?
Right.
If we like it or not, that is just a fact. And the catch-22 seems to be that if we try to remove the bias, they become very flattened in their output.
Hmm. hmm
And we were recently experimenting with a model, and I will not say which model it is out of
Okay.
respect for the brand, but something very funny happened. So we were experimenting with multimodality, and we were using a Seinfeld episode for that. Just
Oh.
Seinfeld, because we thought like if there's one innocent kind of show, then it's Seinfeld. And the model gave back, well, I can't help you with the task because you want me to make assumptions about people's age in the
Oh dear.
Seinfeld.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was like, okay, so I appreciate what people are trying to achieve here,
Yeah.
or what was built in the red tape that was built into the model. But the catch-22 is that yeah, we're doing a fun project with a Seinfeld episode. So it was like not a and and that will be a we the models are just the way that they're currently architected.
hmm
If we keep using the the architectures that currently exist, and if we keep training the way that we currently do, we need to accept that
Right.
the models have a bias, right? And so this is not a direct answer to your question, but I'm certainly aware of the ethical
Mm.
considerations, and um, But if we want to work with these models and get all that goodness, we need to accept that this is a thing, that this is a unsolved problem.
Right, right. Unsolved problem. I think that's very well put. Yeah, because everyone I speak to about ethics, they have, I think the basics are true for everyone, but just the way people interpret and deploy it in their work, that's what varies the most, and that's why I'm always very curious of the perspective. So yeah, moving on to the next topic per se, Weaviate. Let's talk about Weaviate, obviously. Why or how did you and your co-founders decide the name of the company? Very curious.
Ah, that's a great question. Um, so the origin story sits in the fact that I started working with embeddings in like way back, like almost 10 years ago. And back then it was not as obvious as it is today, right? So, but we knew we could do search and retrieval with it. And back then I had a lot of focus on knowledge graphs and those kind of things because I
Mm,
thought like, hey, we can use the embeddings to predict certain relations in the knowledge graphs. And you know, a graph looks like an interwoven thing. So
right.
it was like a we weave it together. Later that changed a little bit because we started to see like, hey, so, so it's very important to bear in mind to when I started with this that I was like that I didn't start 10 years ago with Weaviate, but that was in 2019. But then we started to see, hey, wait a second, these models are going to be way more important than that we actually thought,
Mm,
and we want to weave the models in the database together. And
gotcha.
because the getting an embedding, vector embedding now from a model and shooting that in a database and vice versa is actually a very primitive way of doing it. We can be way
Hmm.
more sophisticated about this. And that is really by bringing the models in a database together to really interlocking them, or as we like to say, weaving together. So
Mm,
that so it comes from weaving, from
nice.
weaving it together. That's the and then on top of that, when you found a company, you always want to do something that has zero Google results, search results, because then you can still buy all the domain names. So that's also
Agreed. That's very cool. Yeah, no, I really like the name. It is kind of self-explanatory, but I wanted to get your perspective on that.
thank you.
So yeah, absolutely. So what's the best part of being a CEO of a growing company like BB8?
The people. So I meet so many great people, and that's amazing. And that's in the company, but also around the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in a very fortunate, blessed situation that I meet amazing people. So that is absolutely my to answer your question, what's the best thing? That's absolutely the number one the number one thing.
Right. I am totally on board. It's like, yeah, people ask me, okay, so what holds value for you when you're looking for a job? I'm like, people. People are
Mm,
at the end of the day, if it's people who are you going to work with, the work part you can learn, but it's the people you want to get along with. So totally agreed and absolutely appreciate your answer to that.
I have
Uh,
if I may add to that, so I have a friend
mhm,
or mentor, I would say, and he told me a beautiful story because it's like a you know, building a startup is not always easy, right? So it's like
yeah.
and you need to make decisions on what you want to do, and he told me a beautiful story, and that's like a all mammals, they have one thing in common is that if they die, their
Mm,
hearts have beaten about 1 billion times. So the reason that a mouse dies sooner than an elephant is because their you know, their heart beats faster. So as humans, um, it goes for us too. So the average lifespan of humans means like it's like 1 billion heartbeats. But one thing that we can decide as humans is what we're going to spend our heartbeats on, right? So the people we work with have a huge impact on that, right? So let's make sure that we spend those heartbeats on great, wonderful experiences with each other and building beautiful businesses or whatever you're into building, right? Rather
mhm.
than spending it on, you know, being upset or concerned about things. So that's how I look at that, and the people are of course the number one input for that.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that story. It's very nice.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so, s- as a CEO and being in this industry, I'm sure you have envisioned several different things of where the trends are going, what's the next step in AI. But I'm curious to know is how do you envision the role of AI evolving in society? And the second part to that question is, what responsibilities do tech companies have in shaping this future in positive and ethical way?
Yeah, so I think so. If we start low level, so that is like the the way that we use technologies, right? They inform our lives and how we live, right? So the fact that we have airplanes, or the technology of airplanes means that we can travel all over the world in less than a day, that the economy starts to evolve around that, and so on and so forth, right? And so it had like the internet had an impact on that, and the cloud, and now we're in this AI wave. And but the question is like on a holistic abstract level. So what is AI doing, right? So what is
Mhm.
it doing different? And one thing that it's doing differently is that it has an opinion on our data, and that's very new. So back in the days, also if you looked at the infrastructure or those kind of things, we stored information, and then the way that we stored it, that's also how it came out. It didn't change.
Right.
That's different with it, right? So it can now morph audio, video, text. Oh, yeah, of course, text. That's how it started, right? Into new things, and it can have opinions on what we've created, or it can combine different inputs together to form an opinion. So that is the biggest impact that we'll see. I always say, like, the holy grail for me combining AI with infrastructure is the day that both of us can go on Netflix, click on the same series, but that is rendered differently real time based on your interest and my
Ah,
interest. And there's no reason that's gonna happen. It's just where we're not yet at that scale yet, so we can't do it at that scale yet. But we can definitely do it. So it's like it's a more an engineering problem now than it's an intellectual conceptual problem. And so that means that if we keep doing that on the architectures that we have right now, what we discussed earlier, is that biases will be, you know, part of these models and how they generate and how they render things.
mm,
And it's super interesting to see what kind of impact that will have on our um, on our society, also from a cultural perspective. Because the interesting thing is that um, let's stay with the Netflix series, right? So there are certain things that we see when we watch
mm-hmm.
a series that's also confirming certain ideas or biases that we have, right, as a species, as humans right now. And uh, and I'm very curious what how the models will impact that, because if we're able to make the models completely somehow that intellectually I cannot comprehend this, because it's impossible to be without bias, right? And it's I like oranges more than I like apples, so it's like, okay, that's a bias for you, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's difficult, but um, um, it's interesting to see what the impact will be on society there, and it will be interesting to see if we can blame a model for something, right?
Right, right.
And because at some point it becomes so difficult what it generated, and then who did that, who said that. It's going to be complex, so it will come with ethical considerations, as any new type of technology does. Which I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying as an excuse, but more as a, yeah, as since the day humans invented fire, we could use it to warm ourselves and cook food, or to throw somebody in the fire,
Right, yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's a that's from the first technological innovation
yeah.
onward. So it's a we need to be aware of it, and we need to yeah. But I somehow I'm also just an optimist. I'm a techno optimist. I'm just not too concerned about this, right? I mean, how many people are now on the planet? Like how many billion people? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a it's not 100% success, but it's going
Yeah.
pretty well, right?
Yeah.
It's
It's
like
in that
a yeah,
direction.
yeah, yeah. It's in the right direction. So it's a, and I think that the innovation around there would be the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. And it becomes very easy to blame the models for the bias, but I think it also leads back to what those models were trained on. It's the data.
Yeah,
So, yeah, and it's a hard concept to, I guess, admit or acknowledge or even understand, I think. Yeah,
exactly. So it and that's complex. But I mean, a lot of work is happening there, and there's a lot of
right.
good work happening there with good intentions. But sometimes you also just need biases right, in the model, right? So if I ask a model, if we try to have the thought experiment, which is extremely difficult, but if we try
Mm-hmm.
to have the thought experiment of having a model without any bias at all,
Mm-hmm.
that is very hard for me to imagine that. Because if I would ask the
Yeah.
model, is it better for me to eat an orange or a bag of chips, right? Then the model without bias should say something along the lines of, well, whatever makes you feel the most comfortable in your body
Yeah,
when you consume this stuff.
exactly.
And maybe we want the model to say, well, if you just want to eat something healthy, you might want to eat the orange, right, rather than a bag of chips. So it's a it's complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
By
yeah.
the way, I once um, I once gave a TEDx talk
Uh-huh.
on digital technology and language. And something that I find absolutely fascinating is that um, in software we use language, of course, always to describe
Right.
something, also before machine learning and LLMs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's so interesting is that software describes in human language the problem we're solving, and but language changes. And
Yeah.
so the famous saying about language is like infinite possibilities with finite means. And I find it very interesting because that basically means that the language we now have and that we use will be used differently 50 years from now, and the technology will evolve with that.
True.
And I'm super excited about that now, especially that we have the models and the statistical models that do more with language.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be super exciting. It's a
Yeah.
so long story short, I'm more excited. I'm more optimistic than
Yeah.
pessimistic about it.
I share your feelings in that. I'm curious where it leads to the next, like what's the next thing, big thing, and that will happen in
Yeah,
this space.
yeah,
So in conclusion, I have just one last question for you, and this is more
sure.
on like from your experience as a leader in the tech industry. What advice would you give to the aspiring entrepreneurs or technologists who are interested in exploring the potential of AI or generative AI?
Yeah, just start building. Just build. Do it. It's a don't overthink it. Just start.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's like it's like if you want to run a marathon, right? It's like at some point you need to practice that first mile, right?
Yeah.
And this is not different. So the 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 open invitation to these people would be: this is the time. This is when people started to figure out, hey, the internet is a thing. This is when people
Hmm.
started to figure out, hey, mobile is a thing, right? This is now
Yeah.
with AI. This is the time.
Yeah.
So if you're considering doing something, then it's better to do it now than tomorrow.
Agreed. Yeah. What you're thinking now might be a reality by somebody else tomorrow. So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bob. This was a very good conversation. I enjoyed learning your perspectives. Yeah, thanks a lot for being here. And I'm delighted that we got this chance to have this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you so much.